You are very welcome back. We're getting ready for the final day of the Rugby Championship tomorrow. We've got a repeat of what was a pretty thrilling finish between New Zealand and Australia last week. And South Africa will know what they have to do before they kick off in their game against Argentina. It is one of the most thrilling Rugby Championships in years, given how close the teams have been across the entire championship. So we're joined now. Mick is still here alongside me, and we've got Stephen Kisbey-Green with us as well to break down the permutations of the final day and South Africa's chances of lifting the Rugby Championship a year out from the World Cup, Stephen.
Evening, yeah, it's definitely one of those very rare rugby championships that we haven't really seen since maybe the early to mid 2000s. It's great to see it's so open going into the last day. Technically, all four teams can actually win it, which is a little bit mad. So as you say, South Africa will know what they have to do, and technically so will Argentina if they have a chance to win it, because tomorrow morning 8 o'clock Irish time kickoff. New Zealand will know if New Zealand beat Australia with a bonus point, then it's all in South Africa's. It's all for South Africa to do. But if Australia win with a bonus point and South Africa lose, Australia will lift the Rugby Championship. If New Zealand win without a bonus point, all South Africa need to do is win with a bonus point. If Australia don't get a bonus point, all South Africa need to do is win. And if Australia win without a bonus point, Argentina can win the Rugby Championship if they win with a bonus point and a positive points difference of 72. So they would need to run up a cricket score, but mathematically Argentina can also still win their first ever Rugby Championship 10 years on after joining.
The trick here is, Mick, did you understand?
I stopped listening, Will, is the truth. I got to the 72 points thing, actually. I joined back in for the end of that, but as I'd imagine all our listeners did, suffice to say it's close and should be a bit of crack tomorrow. And by the time you're watching South Africa and Argentina tomorrow evening, they'll probably make it obvious for us on TV. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, no, it'll definitely be a lot more open tomorrow night when South Africa kick off, and I'm sure Australia are not going to win in Eden Park. It's just not going to happen. So realistically speaking, it's realistically speaking,
that's a big call. Hold on a minute.
New Zealand looked a bit shaky. They should have won last week, Australia.
But it's Eden Park.
But sure, what's Eden Park got to do with the price of coffee? Like. New Zealand never lost to Ireland in New Zealand before this summer. They never used to lose to Argentina. They never, this is a constant. There's no guarantees. You can't just make a statement like that saying they're not going to lose to Australia. Australia should have beat them last week.
Yeah.
Right. What's so mythical about Eden Park then?
It's their record. Well, the record is a little bit tainted as well in the fact that if you count the years at which they haven't lost in Eden Park, they've only played South Africa 3 times. Mm-hmm. So it's not really a true.
South Africa are the only true barometer, according to South African.
No, that's not what I mean. That's not what I mean. It's more.
It's exactly what you mean.
It's one. Literally, you couldn't be more obvious what you meant.
Well, no, but one of the most common enemies that New Zealand face. And they've only played at Eden Park 3 times in a span of 12 years. So obviously there's a reason why they don't play their biggest rival in Eden Park.
You want to follow this point out logically. You were saying that New Zealand cherry-picked the fixtures they play at Eden Park in order to enhance the record.
In order to protect their reputation, yeah. The same thing South Africa do with Loftus.
So this is an interesting point, and you know more about it than I do. I'll just give a counter based on logic, right? They play games.
Dangerous to bring logic in.
They play games all around the country. They have, I think, maybe like 4 main venues and maybe another 3 where they play tests. So there's probably about 7 New Zealand test sites. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Eden Park will always be one of them, so it's a more chance of getting them there.
No, they don't play a test in Eden Park every year.
They don't play any tests in Eden Park every year.
Yeah. So there's no guarantee of New Zealand playing a test match at Eden Park.
Okay, fine. Yeah. Okay, great.
But Auckland and Christchurch are always.
There you go. So even more reason to my eventual logic that I'm going to explain to you, which is that they generally, most of the time, will play South Africa 1 time in New Zealand, possibly 2 when they were playing each other 3 times.
Yeah.
But that's a while since they've done that, isn't it?
Yeah, that's 2.
And even then, that's only every second year. Okay, so they're not playing South Africa all that often. They've a lot of places to go. And you're saying they've played them 3 times in 12 years. That makes perfect sense. That it would just on the rotation would happen to have New Zealand versus South Africa there.
Yes,
and also
when you
New
look at the
Zealand
law of
versus
averages,
Australia is a bigger fixture to the locals because of the obvious local rivalry in the
more often
Belfast
if they
Cup
played Australia there.
that is a good question that I don't have off the top of my head, but I don't think it's.
If you're going to make the claim that is being protected in South Africa are playing there,
I don't think it's as
It's a big claim.
common as I don't think it's as common as you'd think. I think they've played France more often in Eden Park than they've played South Africa or Australia in the years since losing to France in '94.
No, that would lend some credence to your
but
argument.
what also lends some credence to my point is South Africa have about 8 test venues sprinkled across the country, and yet apart from Mbombela or Nelspruit this year, South Africa have pretty much stuck the New Zealand match in Ellis Park, Loftus or Newlands. Or now Greenpoint, because they've moved from Newlands. So basically, Joburg, Pretoria, or Cape Town, and it's always those 3 for New Zealand. Then the other matches get spread around. So South Africa put the premier match in the premier stadiums, the three biggest stadiums in the country, whereas New Zealand seemed to. I mean, we played the 100th Test match against New Zealand. Okay, granted, it was because of COVID and because of the weird sort of things that happened last year in the Rugby Championship. It was all hosted by Australia. But the 100th Test match between New Zealand and South Africa was played in Townsville, for God's sakes.
Do you like the idea of a roaming test venues for country? It's funny. It's kind of interesting because it for the Southern Hemisphere it totally buys it from a Northern Hemisphere point of view. It totally buys into the idea of a tour, which is a very rugby thing. But obviously we just play in Lansdowne, England just play in Twickenham, Scotland play in Murrayfield. Whereas most of the time it's Stade de France. Maybe they'll play in Stade Velodrome once a year, maybe if that. But in general they don't do it in. And obviously the vast spaces of Southern Hemisphere countries.
And Italy almost always play at the Stadio Olimpico as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They switch their home, but they always have one at a time, I suppose. Yeah.
Australia's an odd one because they're unlike say New Zealand and South Africa, which they kind of stick to. Sydney more.
They played in Melbourne last week, which I actually thought was a. By the way, I didn't realise what I know as the Telstra Dome and has become something else is now Marvel Stadium.
Yeah,
which is I didn't know that until last week, but anyway, weird.
I thought it was pronounced Mavel until I heard the Aussies pronounce it.
And it's Marvel, as in like Marvel.
It's spelled Mavel. There's no R in it.
It's up there on the thing with the Marvel sign, like as in like Captain America.
I thought that too when I saw it last week.
The sign, unless they have very similar writing.
Marvel Stadium, Docklands, Victoria, Australia.
It's Marvel, like as in Disney Marvel.
I thought there was no more. I thought there was
the naming rights sponsorship purchased by Marvel.
But Melbourne is a strange place to put an Australia-New Zealand Test match because like rugby union is it's not like if you I live there for a year. If you go like the media, sports media doesn't even cover rugby union. It doesn't come up. I know it does for Wallabies games, but it's like way down the list. It'd be like us covering Ireland playing rugby league in the World Cup.
When I picked up a paper in Melbourne a couple of years ago, that's something I found quite strange, was that the City Group's team, Melbourne City or whatever they're called these days, they rebranded as well. They were the front page story and not the rugby union in the local media in Melbourne.
On a time when
and even the AFL was in like post-season and the transfers around that and the potential moves were actually getting more traction than rugby.
AFL cricket, and then cricket would be next, and then rugby league would have a little bit more, but again it's not rugby country. But funnily enough, Melbourne's such a great city for live sporting events that they get big crowds to the games. So you'd imagine if you're the Australian Rugby Union, you're thinking like, geez, we really should get to Melbourne more often. We'll fill out the stadium, it's a great atmosphere, and hopefully we kind of can infiltrate the city a little bit, but it sort of never does. But also it's always a full house. It's a really weird situation. Think about that here. Think about bringing like the Munster hurling final to Killarney or something like that and expecting a big local audience to come in and watch it. It's just, I don't know, maybe that's a terrible example, but you know what I mean.
It is unusual. It's something we don't think about because we use one set stadium all the time, and therefore Lansdowne Road is the home of Irish rugby and Twickenham is the home of rugby and all that. So
is that enough of a tangent, by the way?
I think it's a fine tangent. I think if I was the Australian Rugby Board at the moment, I would want to use Sydney in their new stadium as much as possible. It's a very Northern Hemisphere feeling stadium as well. It was amazing, that game a couple of weeks ago there when they played against South Africa. South Africa themselves, Stephen, I want to ask you about the fact that Steyn has not played out half for a long, long time, since 2008.
Yeah. Well, so that was the last time he started. I mean, technically he's lined up a couple of times in the line at out half. So just because I know there'll be people commenting that he came off the bench and he ran there for 3 minutes.
For clarity,
South African rugby fans are mad, aren't they?
They are. As one of them, we are all absolutely.
They'd worry about that kind of. They'd worry about that kind of comment.
He's named to start at out half for the Springboks before we get killed in the YouTube comments.
Yes,
Continue.
Kill away. We're not reading them.
For the first time in 2008, France Steyn will be wearing the number 10 jersey. That match was a 28-0 victory against Italy. I think that was in South Africa as well. Might have been in Durban as well.
That's 14 years ago.
Yeah, I mean
14 years.
Francois Steyn's Test career has spanned 16 years. He is 2 years younger than Johnny Sexton. And yet he's seen as the 97-year-old Springbok fly half that we throw into whatever, not even fly half, utility back. I also had a double look there as well. I was looking at his Test debut. His debut was on the wing in Lansdowne Road, not even the Aviva, against Ireland in a 32-15 defeat. So the Ireland beat, captained by Brian O'Driscoll, Ireland beats South Africa 32-15 in. But since then, I don't think anyone would have even thought to put Francois Steyn on the wing. So Jake White was on some next level weirdness back in 2006 because also at that point Francois Steyn had only started 6 matches for the Sharks at that point, all of which were at 10.
Was that a year out from World Cup thinking where he wanted to try people out?
Exactly, yeah. But I say the man is 19. He has only played 6 matches for the Sharks in Durban at out half at 10. So you start him in his first debut on the left wing against Ireland, and then the next week you put him at fullback again, a position which he's never played before at international or at professional level, and then he's playing 12 and 13 in the World Cup final. A year later. The man has had a phenomenal career, and it's ridiculous that he's only on something like 76 caps. He should be 150 plus at this point because he had a 3-year hiatus.
He's not going to be the box starting 10 at the World Cup next year. Who is going to be the box starting 10 next year?
That is a very good question. If you ask me, I'd love it to be Damien Willemse. I think he's been the find of the year. And
you're saying that Percy Montgomery has no chance?
No, good chance of running out of 15 though.
Okay, yeah. It'd be. I would trust him more there, but it's obviously such a crisis that
Actually, if anybody finds a picture, there's a picture from about 6 months ago of Percy Montgomery standing next to Stephen Kisbey-Green, and Percy Montgomery is bigger than the current first choice South African prop. And I'm not saying like heavier, like muscle-wise. His bicep is as big as Ibn Etzebeth. It's ridiculous the fitness that man has. But
he could do a job.
Definitely. It's when Morné Steyn arrives at some point to beat the Lions in 20 years' time as well.
Yeah, 100%. So Handré Pollard is lost a bit of form, I'd say. His form of this, he's been... originally he was brought in because he was a sharpshooter for the best part, and he was brilliant at game management. That's not what he's been doing at the moment. He's been a bit flaky. His kicking for the tee has been a bit flaky. I think Damien Willemse this year might have played him out of position. Elton Jantjies is going through some personal crises at the moment, which we'd rather not get into. He's basically cost himself a Springbok position at the moment. Other than that, there's only really 3 options in South African rugby, none of which are tested at that level. You've got Chris Smith from the Bulls, who is very much in the style of Pollard. You've got Mani Libok from the Stormers, who's very much in Damien Willemse, hot stepper, spreads the ball wide. And then you've got Jordan Hendricks, which is from the Lions, which he's kind of a marriage of the two. So if you kind of want to play him, he's also the one that the Springbok management have singled out for praise recently. But again, none of them have shown true next level class that you'd imagine to be okay. I would trust him at 10 to win a World Cup final. So South Africa might be going through quite a heavy fly half crisis at the moment. And
transitional Springboks.
Love to hear it.
Yeah, considering they're a group. Just because I know we don't have much time. New Zealand, Australia. I feel like we're glossing over it because of the decision that New Zealand are definitely going to win. I was talking to SKG about this yesterday. all the controversy around what happened at the end of last week's game in Melbourne completely overshadowed an incredible game.
It was brilliant.
It was on yesterday morning. I was just like, I ended up watching like most of the second half. It was absolutely brilliant. Some of the rugby was fantastic. Some of it was terrible, which leads to a brilliant test match as well.
Yeah.
You know, Australia's try to go ahead towards the end was absolutely brilliant. It was so good. Some of their turnovers straight after. They were playing really well towards the end of the game, I thought. And obviously, New Zealand then still did what they had to do to win with the help of a questionable refereeing call that is questionable.
I mean,
Yeah, no, questionable. I'm not saying right or wrong.
It's debatable no matter what
Yeah.
side of the fence you fall on here.
yeah.
So just like that should be good fun tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
Should be.
You know, people like live sport at 8 o'clock in the morning, and yet I feel like sometimes we forget that these games are on.
Well,
Unless
tomorrow-
you're a rugby nut, like,
Yeah.
as the general sports fan, as me and you are, Will, sometimes we forget that these games are on at 8 o'clock in the morning, and they are going to be full-on entertainment. Like,
Yeah, rugby, of course, here on Off the Ball is with thanks to Vodafone, official sponsor of the Irish team. We all belong to the team of us. Tomorrow actually works out quite well, Mick, as well. If you were an Australian sports fan, there's a talking to a mate of mine who is in Oz and he's getting ready for tomorrow in Sydney. So he was saying early afternoon, you've got the AFL Grand Final. Pretty much directly after that, you've got New Zealand against Australia. Then they've got Rugby League, I think, on almost directly after that. They pretty much have a full day where you can sit down and watch sport from 2 in the afternoon until 10 o'clock at night and then wander home afterwards. It's all over by about midday here, but it works out quite perfectly for them.
I mean, if you're an Irish supporter, you can watch all of that, and then you transition to the URC, and then you've got, and then you go all the way into Ireland, Scotland tomorrow night. It's a full-on weekend of sport for us.
Yeah, if you're willing to get up at, whatever, 5:30 in the morning to watch the AFL.
and stay and then watch Ireland play football.
I think there might be an hour
gonna be
between where
hard
you
to
can
stay
take a
awake.
nap.
Stephen,
Sorry, probably during the URC, let's face it.
yeah, let's have Stephen defend the URC. Stephen, then give us a prediction for tomorrow then. Mick and I are not quite as taken as you are with this idea of it's Eden Park, New Zealand are invincible, they're going to win. Who's lifting the trophy tomorrow?
I'm gonna go with gut and say South Africa. South Africa gonna win. Gonna win the rugby champs. They're gonna beat Argentina with about 13 points.
This is so specific, by about 13
points. I'm not going to give you an exact scoreline, but like they're going to win by about 13 points. I think New Zealand will edge it by about 4 or 5 over Oz. Not going to be enough to get the bonus point. Not going to be enough to do enough. So South Africa will get a bonus point, and that's how they'll win.
Okay, should be a really good day's rugby. Stephen, thanks a million for joining us.